everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Crew Talk, brought to you by Shoots.video. Today, we have a large panel with us, and we are going to be learning all about color grading and everything there is to know. As always, if you have questions during the webinar, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box down there, and we will get to them as soon as we can. But I'm excited to introduce my panel today. We have Warren, Jason, Patrick, and Oliver with us. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I just want to kind of go down the line of how I see you guys in order and just say your name, where you are, and kind of what you do. Just like a brief little explanation on you. So, Warren, you are up first. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm based in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a colorist here, originally from the UK, been here 20 years now, and I color all sorts of genres, everything from YouTube clips up to movies. That's
wonderful.
Me.
Well, thank you for being here. And next, we have Jason. Hey, Jason.
Hey, my name is Jason Bodak, and I'm a colorist and finishing artist based in Los Angeles, California. And I run a company called Pixel Tools, and I'm also a colorist and finishing artist at Fox Studios.
Wonderful. Well, we are glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And next up, we have Patrick. Hey, Patrick.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me here. My name is Patrick Inhofer. I am a professional colorist. I also teach and train, and have been doing this for many, many decades at this point, and based in Orlando, Florida.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Oliver, you're last but not least.
Hi, I'm Oliver Peters. I'm in Orlando, Florida as well. And I'm kind of the hyphenated guy here on the panel. I do creative editing as well as color correction, whatever the client needs.
Wonderful. You'll probably be able to answer a lot of our questions then today. So as always, I have my list of questions here. If you guys have any that are watching, drop them in the Q&A box. But I'm going to just ask the basic question because I'm not familiar with it at all. What is color grading? And feel free to jump in and give the explanation, anyone. But don't all jump at once to answer the question.
I'll go.
Okay,
So,
perfect. Warren, yeah, perfect.
There's often the question on what's the difference between, say, color correction and color grading, and people have different views, but my sort of take on it, if you went and shot something in different conditions with different cameras, different times of the day, obviously different color temperatures, different times of the day, different cameras, you've got to balance them and make them all look normal. So you're trying to make them as if they all happened at the same point of time. That's more color correction. You're correcting things to be a normal, but a grade is probably more of a creative process where you're trying to help a director tell a story with your color grading to make it more scary or more happy. And you're doing that a bit like a composer does with sound. So that's pretty much my take on it.
Okay. And what kind of software do you use for something like that?
I would say it's all over the landscape these days. Resolve has obviously been the one that gets the most press, but certainly in the high-end world, Basslight, Filmlight is a pretty strong contender. Obviously on the pricey side, if you're an avid editor and you do avid finishing, especially in the reality TV world, Avid Symphony, which is built-in tool set, is still pretty much the go-to just because of the speed and no need for, kind of a round trip between the edit and so on.
Yeah, and I'd add that probably between all the different, any software that allows you to adjust brightness, contrast, saturation, hue, basically those are the fundamental tools that any of us are working off of. And so almost any application that deals with moving digital images that allows you to make those adjustments can be used for color correction and color grading. Just to kind of riff off of what Warren said a moment ago about the difference between the two. I mean, this was a big discussion maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when digital color correction was really becoming known as a thing you can actually do. And it was accessible through tools like Final Cut. I mean, I started, I was color correcting and color grading in Final Cut 3 with their brand new 3-way color corrector, right? Before that was Avid Symphony at the end of the 1990s. So, color correction, in my view, is the initial process of balancing images, making them match, technical, like Warren said, technical. And then when you get to story expression, that becomes color grading. But it's a really loose delineation. And I don't think if any of us here heard someone give a slightly different version of that, I don't think any of us would object. It's in the end, color grading is like the all-encompassing thing, and divvy it up between the two however you want.
Oh, awesome explanation. Thank you. Jason, question for you. When coloring, how do you determine when and what to use?
So this is a question that is one that I actually struggled with when I was first starting out, because I was looking for the right tool or the correct tool to use. And the answer is, it doesn't really matter which tool you use as long as you're getting the right result. I think as I've become a better colorist, I've learned more tools and I've learned the right time to use them, as opposed to reaching for a tool that works really well, but using it in the wrong circumstance. So I encourage people to vary their tool set. So for instance, a great story, I used to be very afraid of curves. In fact, I just didn't get them. Every time I touched them, I just didn't understand what was happening. And so I think the second year I was a professional colorist, said, finally, I'm going to figure these out. I'm going to start using them more. And then all of a sudden it started to make more sense. And now they're one of my favorite tools. I don't always reach for them, but when I reach for them, I know how to use them. So there's this constant search for the best or the number one tool. And it's just, there is no number one tool. Same thing with the software. It's more like when you're cooking in the kitchen. What is the best tool? It's specifically, you'll find cooks that work with one tool and another one that works with another one.
So is it kind of based on like location or feel, just kind of like what you're feeling?
It's a combination of my style. I may like the feel of a certain control and the effect that I'm getting with it. And Patrick or Warren may like the feel of another one. And if we can both get the same result from it, that's great.
I think you have to differentiate, just so we're clear for the audience, that tool could mean this application versus a different application, or it can mean whatever P module within a given application, right? So Resolve has bunches of different places you can go to do most of the basic corrections. But then if you're talking about applications of software, there may be a reason to do the color correction in the built-in capability of Avid or Premiere or Final Cut 10 versus going outside to a color correction software. And sometimes that gets down to just turnaround time. There is a round trip workflow, and that takes time in a lot of cases, and some projects simply don't allow that. Or it can be the nature of the production, right? If everything was shot fairly decently and you just want a nice overall good look, you could probably do that in the tools that exist in any application. But if you want, I tend to call it more of a surgical correction, where you're sitting with the DP and you're really effectively relighting the scene by the color correction. That's where something like DaVinci Resolve or Filmlight Baselight or Mystica or any of those higher end tools really shine.
Wonderful. Patrick, Warren, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I was going to say the same thing as what Oliver said. I mean, I got a question for you guys. Can you ever look at anything and go, I know what software color corrected that show? I know what I think.
No.
I can never tell. The only way that I know is if I personally know that person and know that house or that person happens to use that tool, but never based off a blind image.
No, because you can get to anywhere with most of these softwares. And I often say there's a certain amount of pain to get there in some of them as opposed to others. But you can sort of get there. They just all do it in different ways. And then it's down to the user what they like to use. And like Jason's, if you're using curves or you like the trackballs, or there's lots of ways to do things. And that's sort of a choice that you get with experience.
Yeah,
So
I have
it's
to agree with that. And again, I think when we're talking about applications, I think most of us, the application is going to be determined oftentimes by whoever's employing us, right? So if you work at a shop that is centered around Premiere or Final Cut or Resolve, then that's going to kind of set the baseline as to what you have to adapt to. And then once you're in one of those apps, it'll determine the tool set that's available to you. And then you'll start developing preferences as to, okay, what part of the color correction workflow am I in, and which tool do I prefer to solve particular problems? And then, so then you can start kind of narrowing it down in that part. But unless you're working in your own space and you get to dictate, and then it's a personal preference.
One destination, many ways to get there, just whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
Nice. So we do have a question in the Q&A box already. It's from Ben Taft. Hey, Ben, thank you for joining us today. He says, hello, panelists. My name is Ben. I'm a 19-year-old trying to start an internship in the industry. What is some advice that you think I would need to learn to give me an upper hand or unique skill set that would set me apart from the other competition? Anyone can take it.
I guess I'll jump in because I advise a number of colleges and have worked with students and stuff like that. So when you're talking about a formal internship, that usually needs to go through a school because a production company, a facility, has to deal with how they handle employees. So you can't just say, hey, I'll donate my time for free and come in, because then they've got some HR issues that become a problem. So you want to go through an official internship program based on whatever college you're going to. And then at that time, your skill set is whatever you've got to offer. If you're strong on the production side and you really like cameras and dealing with that stuff, look for an internship where that is going to utilize your abilities, or at least let you sit in on stuff. Most of the time, if you're an intern, face it, you're going to do the junk work, right? You're going to make copies, you're going to get coffee for people, that sort of thing. But it's the opportunity to observe how the industry works. And there's a lot of value to that down the road. But on the other hand, if your inclination is graphics, or if it's audio mixing or color correction, seek that out and see where they can be placed. When I worked at a facility, we would frequently have interns, and on occasion they were allowed to sit in on edit sessions and basically be quiet, sit in the back of the room and just observe. And, a lot of them got a lot out of it.
We have so many questions filling up the chat and Q&A box, which is great. I love it. So our next question is, and I'm going to mispronounce the first name, so I'm so sorry. It's Vera Diana. What is the best way to find work post-university graduation? Patrick, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that is take a job that gets you into the business, right? I mean, I often say that the best job I ever got was the very first job I got, because it allowed me to do a little bit of everything. It was a really small shop. They were shooting, they were editing. We had our own, like animatic stand back in the day when, this is 30 years ago. But the point is I was doing everything, as Oliver said, from cleaning air filters and cleaning the monitors on the professional displays to I was running the camera on the shoots, and then I was editing, and there were several editing rooms, and smaller jobs happened over here. Bigger jobs happened with the experienced guy. And the main point of the first job I got, was to figure out what I don't want to do. Right? Oftentimes, because our business is so big and there's so many different crafts and arts, and you think you want to be a DP, and that's what I thought. I thought I was going to be a camera guy until I did a bunch of these corporate shoots where I had an hour to throw up the lights. I had 30 minutes to like get everything set up. I was put in these terrible environments that we somehow had to make look good. And it drove me nuts because I wanted more of a filmic type of experience. That work wasn't available to me where I lived at the time. This was in New York. So New York was pretty much commercials at the time. And I just couldn't find that in, but I discovered I loved the editorial process. I loved the post-production process. So I was able to, on my next job, kind of narrow it in a little bit more, right? And then once you narrow it in, then you can start, kind of fine tuning where do you fit in all of this and what really gets you up in the morning and makes you happy to go into work every day.
That's great. I mean, it's great to experience all areas of the fields. And like you said, you know what you want to do and what you don't want to do.
Even, do you want to be on set or do you want to be in post? Two very different experiences, two very different career tracks. And you may think you want one until you've spent some time doing it as a job at JOB. And then you suddenly realize, I can't do this every day. And I need to go in the other direction, right?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Sort of what you need before you even go knocking on the doors. Say you wanted to be an editorial, you need some sort of show reel. Now, obviously, if you've been through a university, you will have shot some stuff, you will have some stuff, but you may only get one chance at one company. So you need a show reel, as simple as it could be, which can just sit on Vimeo or YouTube of your work. And obviously a bit of we used to call them CVs, but no one calls them that anymore, do they? Like a buy-up of what you've done, and just present yourself in a way, and don't be afraid of knocking on doors. I find a lot of young people don't want to knock on doors. They go, you just send it online.
Or
just
pick up the
make a nuisance of yourself.
Pick up the telephone. I find a lot of young people don't like using the phone.
We don't. And we're all guilty of not ringing, don't we? We don't ring, we do an email, we send a text. We're all guilty of that. But you got to be really pushy if you want to get into this industry. It's not going to come and find you.
So I want to echo what everybody else is saying. It seems like information that you've read on a website, or I get it. I have to go out there and do the crap work. But so I started at the Disney Channel I was starting my own YouTube channel on the side. I thought I was going to be a camera guy and do After Effects on the side. And I did 2 or 3 internships there. I reorganized every single tape at the Disney Channel. And I was, ironically, at the time, I went through the tape to file transition. And in that, I learned a lot of crucial information that I use every single day now. And it was an incredible experience. I didn't stay there for years and years after that, but I was able to take in a really important amount of information. And I learned how to work in post-production. I learned the relationships that are really important to forge and the way that you should not work with people, which I would not have been able to learn on my own in the same way than working with large vendors like Point360 and Deluxe and Photochem. So that's a really great experience. And so just going to any local post house, and if you don't have access to a local post house, then there are virtual post houses now. So see if you can try to get into those. There's a lot of them using Trello to just try and get some experience to work under somebody. It's even for a short period of time, it is an incredible experience, and you'll walk away with something.
So one of the things I'd just jump in real quick, and that is in the last few years, getting in is a lot harder than it used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. There are fewer staff positions. Post houses have gone down the tubes in many cases, and it's a much more diversified but also democratized industry. And fewer and fewer employees, but more and more gig workers, right? I work freelance. I work in a shop where we've got several different freelance editors that are virtually there the whole time, but they're definitely not staff. So you got to double your efforts. On the plus side, where everybody's going with a lot of media, especially marketing, is social media related. And if you're coming out of school right now, you probably have a much better handle on how to do effective social media in terms of video content than the production company itself may have. So that may be as simple as offering your services for doing some sort of behind the scenes coverage of a production that they're doing. Or, hey, we're going to do a quick, 1 minute Facebook thing or Instagram or whatever, just to kind of be the marketing arm of that. So there are, good news, bad news kind of thing.
Sarah, to rip, if I can, I just want to rip off of what Oliver just said, which is, there has never been a better time to create content. Everyone has a camera on their phone. Everyone can tell stories, and you don't have to go to college to learn how to tell stories. You can just do it, just tell stories, right? If you do go to college, what you're going to learn is, so you go to college to take 3 or 4 years of learning off that learning curve, right? So you can spend 5 years making a bunch of mistakes, or you go to school for a couple of years and you compress that down. Instead of 5 years of mistakes, you'll spend 1 year making mistakes. Then you get an internship at an established post house. The advantage of that is it takes 4 or 5 years of learning and eliminates that from having to do it on your own, because part of the value of an internship is learning what not to do, what mistakes not to make, how not to talk to clients is as important as learning what to say, how to communicate, right? And so the advantage of working at an established shop and with established professionals is learning those routines that you should avoid without having to go through the pain of learning that mistake, right? And so that's the advantage there. But at the same time, if you don't have access to those avenues, tell stories. Find people who have stories that need to be told, and they need assistance in particular skill sets, and then offer your assistance in those skill sets. And that's another way of building up your reel and being able to say, hey, I've worked on this short and I worked on that short, and I did these different jobs, right? Don't be afraid. These kind of no-low stuff, no pay, low pay stuff. Don't be afraid of that. As long as you're getting something out of it, then you're not being used at that point. If you're getting something out of it, then they're not abusing that relationship. It only becomes abusive is if you feel coerced into taking that job at a price and a price point, doing a job you think you can do and you should be paid for, right? So that's kind of my way of also approaching the ubiquity of storytelling. And I think Oliver was straight on. There are a lot of non-traditional places to look. Corporations have their own communications divisions. They've got, Instagram feeds to fill and TikTok feeds to fill. And your ability to then say, hey, let me do that. Let me take what I've been doing with my iPhone and do that for you, for your business. I think, thinking outside the box like that, like Oliver just suggested, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the questions that have been asked. Somebody asked, is there work to be found on the internet? Like, what method would you go about to using the internet to find work? And then Ben had a 2-part question. Do you think applying for a company as an unpaid internship is a bad idea? And then is going to university or college the best route? But I guess it really is kind of what works for you. There's no yes or no answer, right?
Can I start on that one real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to say that I am 100% against the unpaid internships, simply because there is always somebody looking to abuse new people that are looking to make it in the industry. This is especially true in LA and New York, and there's this nostalgia of making it. So there is always going to be someone that's, I'll pay you $25 an hour, but you got to use your equipment and your camera, and you got to bring your actors and actresses, and I want 3 cuts by 2 weeks from now. So what I would say is give somebody an equal trade, give somebody a good deal. Maybe it's for $100, but don't do unpaid. There has to be some transfer of something to make it a professional. Otherwise, it's just some kid or somebody's doing something and I'm getting it for free. But if you can put a little bit of money where your mouth is, it becomes a professional obligation, a professional relationship.
Yeah, and as the guy who pulled out the no-low thing, let me also agree with Jason on that. I mean, I will occasionally, I haven't done it in a couple of years, I've just been too busy, but I will occasionally, when I have downtime, take essentially, for me, it's a free job. But even free jobs, I have like a baseline, like $400, right? I don't care what it is. I'm getting my $400. And not because that $400 means anything to me, other than it establishes that I'm either a professional, or if I was just starting out my career, an aspiring professional. And if, if I was just starting out, it might be $50 would be my minimum thing. But if they can't come up with $50 for me to edit their film, and by the way, you're going to do it on my schedule because you're not paying me, right? Or you're paying me $50. You're going to give me latitude to fit it into my schedule. That's what you get for basically low pay. The point is that money exchange changes the relationship, and it helps you weed out those people who are there just to abuse you. So I'll take my previous comment and kind of modify it with what Jason said.
Yeah, I can add to that. We've sort of jumped on getting paid. I had a phone call a couple of weeks ago, and a guy said, I saw the last movie you did, and I'd love you to color correct this. I had to try to color it myself. I'm not happy. It's an indie feature. Yeah. Fine. I said, send me a little work in progress of the cut, which I always asked. And I said, yeah, the film looks good. I always quote 10 days to grade a feature film, whether it's going to be 10. I always start at 10. And the guy then started talking about deferred payments and, you get paid when we make money. I was interested. I said, well, not really. I've been down that road a few times on a few movies and never seen anything. So I said, oh, I like your film. I like what you shot. I like what you do. I'll do it for half rate. And I've heard nothing. Crickets. But
and are you
there may
upset
be
about
people that would have said yes. So I suppose if he keeps asking around, he'll probably get someone who will do it. But I won't. I'm with Patrick. You set a benchmark with a rate, and that gives them discipline as well.
And did that upset you, Warren? Were you disappointed that you didn't get that, having set your benchmark?
No, it may come back. It may be that the guy's been shopping around, but that's the way it is. I set out the stall, and I think, well, if it comes in, it's good. And I'm also looking at it from what can be good for my reel. If it's interesting and there's some really good stuff in there and I know I can use stuff for a reel, then great. That's the other angle for me as well. But big thing for me is, and when we're talking about guys pitch things to me, and I get a lot of stuff where it's just not pitched properly, like short films, and I get even people will come up to, nothing wrong with Instagram, but they'll pitch it with a little one line and a smiley emoji, and I'm sure you don't want to color this film with no money and things, but just really pitch things with stills or mood boards of what you want or what you've done before. And if you're asking someone to help you, maybe color your film or whatever, then just be a bit more organized and professional about things, because I do see a lot of stuff coming into me and it's not the best pitch.
You want them to make it easy for you to take the job, right?
Yeah.
It's make it easy for me to want to help you if you're going to make a good deal for them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, Jason. They're coming asking me to do probably, let's say, half rate. Sometimes it might even be less. And they've got to be really on the ball, and they've got to sell it to me. I want them to sell it to me, not just, a few lines and here's a little Vimeo of what I did last year.
Oliver, I stepped on you. Did you want to
Well,
say something?
I was just going to say, from the internship, just to kind of tie things up for Ben, is internships are usually official things through a college, and you're getting college credit in return for that, right? So it's an internship tied to a video production class or a film class or something like that. That's completely different than going to somebody without a college association and saying, hey, can I work for you for free as an intern? Different ball game there.
Warren, you spoke about rates, and I know in the voiceover world, there's a standard of, what the rates are, what they should be. And, there's a website where we can go look at it, and, agencies know it. For your line of work, is there like an established rate guide, or are you just setting it yourself? And if you're new, how do you learn what you should be charging?
It's a very good question, Sarah. And one of the things with the CSI, which is the Colorist Society, This is the first time any colorists have ever tried to get together any sort of organization, obviously a society, is to maybe try and standardize things a little bit in terms of rates. Now, we're doing this down in Australia. We had a Zoom call last week with 20 of the chapter members of Australia and New Zealand. And like we have roughly sort of benchmarks of where you're going to be for a day of long form, what you may charge an hour if you're doing commercials. And so everybody's pretty much on the same page. And then if we get junior members come in, we encourage them to be the same, not to go in there with really low rates because that's not good for anybody. So that's a good thing. We're trying to sort of standardize it, but in answer to the question, there's nothing official written down anywhere. There's no union rate for color.
Yeah, I think if someone wants to figure out, so much of this is based on where you live, right? I mean, the notion that someone living in San Francisco is going to charge the same hourly rate as someone living in a suburb of Louisiana, where the costs of living are so dramatically different, tax structures are really different. It's really hard to say that the rate that I get in San Diego is the rate I should get when I live outside in a suburb of New Orleans, right? Or I live out in Orlando. It's going to be different than where I originally started from. I started in New York. I spent, 25 years working in New York City. So my rate structure is going to be different down here in Orlando. And given our connected world, I can even make that work to my advantage. But at the same time, I need to be cognizant of the standard rates in some of the big cities so that I can work off of that. So I'm not really undermining the overall rate structure. And a great place to look for this, the Blue Collar Post, what is it? Blue Collar
Post Collective, BCPC.
Collective. Yeah. Katie Hinson, who helps organize that, she's been running a survey of post-production salaries all over the world. And she publishes those. I mean, they're free to download. You can download the spreadsheets and you can look in your city, not only for colorists, but for editor, assistant editor, DP, grip, right? So she has the breakdowns for all of these different key skills. And she also shows based on your experience, right? The notion that me as a 1-year experienced colorist is going to bill the same rate as a 20-year experienced colorist is probably not realistic. And so when you look at these salary ranges, you probably want to have an understanding of who's charging what based on their experience in that particular skill. And so I would encourage anybody interested in that, definitely find them, the BPCC out on Facebook. I think if you do a Google search on them.
Jason actually just linked it. Yeah, Jason just linked it. Is that what you linked, Jason?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that too. It's an enormously helpful study.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
I would just point out rates for color correction are going to be a little bit different because unlike editors pretty much can survive on a laptop and some software if they had to, right? Whereas colorists have a much greater investment in hardware. So if you're talking about, a decent grading monitor, a color correction panel, a decent room environment, even if you're working on your own, that's a different benchmark in terms of just your operating cost than it is if you're a freelance editor. And then so much of color correction is still done in professional post houses, right? It's still sort of the last vestige of big iron post, right? And so if you're bidding a job with that kind of facility versus an independent colorist, it can be night and day different in terms of the rates. And then it also depends on the deliverables, right? If you're delivering a finished product for, let's say, a high-end marketing video that's primarily for the web, that's different than if you're delivering a feature film or something to Netflix or whatever, where you've got umpteen sub-deliverables, right, between the various masters, HDR, SDR, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of aspects to it, and to simply go, okay, this is the day rate or this is the hourly rate doesn't, it doesn't really give you a comprehensive picture if you're trying to evaluate the cost on a job.
It's interesting. One of the things I've always found, because I was an editor for a decade before I fully went into color correction, and probably the biggest difference between the two careers, besides the skill set, the biggest difference between the two careers is, as an editor, I could get booked on a job for 3 or 4 months at a time. I mean, I only had to find 3 jobs a year. And because they were bulk buying me as an editor, I could discount my rate because I knew I was getting paid 5 days a week for the next 15 weeks. As a colorist, jobs, your calendar is this beast that has to constantly be fed. Warren talked about a feature taking 10 days, right? But the editor cutting that feature spent 6 to 8 months on it. So the people on this call for color grading, our rate structure reflects the fact that we don't build in that discount for the long term of the job, right? And we are constantly having to find new work and constantly having to find new clients. And so for that reason, that's one reason why you'll find colorists on an hourly rate, even as freelancers working at other people's facilities using their equipment, tend to make a premium over editors of similar experience, largely because those editors are being hired for much longer periods of time.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Martha. Hey, Martha. She says, hi, I come from the print world doing color correction for magazines and books. Have you crossed paths with colorists who moved from still photography to video? And do you feel like the skills are transferable? She knows curves inside and out.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I'd say in our eye colorist training classes, we get quite a few people have come as being retouchers, or they're shooters, they're still shooters, and they want to move into more a DP world. It could be that they're already shooting, they're retouching, and the client says, oh, we want to do this little one-line campaign. Can you do it? And obviously they want to do it, but the grading side of it puts them a little bit out of the comfort zone. But I'll be honest, normally those people have a really good eye, and you can walk around. If you've got 6 students in a room, you could probably walk around and you can tell the people that have been grading stills, because a lot of very similar things. It's just you got to remember to hit play. And the still guys don't want to hit play. They're afraid of the noise or the grain or the tracking. But I would say, yes, yeah, you've definitely got a head start and you can probably make a good picture.
The only thing I'd counter there a little bit, and the reason I do is every now and then you encounter the DP who's just taken a reference shot and just gone to town in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever and says, here, I want it to look like this. And as a colorist, you look at that and go, gosh, that's great, but given the budgeted time to do that now on every shot and have it be consistent, it's a whole different world. So aside from having the eye, which is the good part of it, part of being a colorist is also managing the flow and being able to make the shots consistent from shot to shot to shot. Whereas if you're doing a bunch of fashion stills, they can be all over the place. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, that's the part of hit and play, isn't it? You play and it runs into another shot, which is a different angle shot on a different day with a GoPro that the producer's son was using. So that's our big challenge. And you're right, Oliver, when you say, in Photoshop and Lightroom, you can spend a lot of time on one. You can spend a day, couldn't you, retouching one still. We obviously don't have that time, so speed does come into it, and you sort of get faster as you get more experience. It's sort of you keep going on a level like that, but that's an important thing as well, yeah. Speed.
Color grading video. Oh.
Go ahead, Jason.
Color grading video has a lot more of an importance placed on workflow, because obviously, at least on stills, I found workflow is important. You might be able to do something backwards and you can get back to what you wanted to do, but you're going to do it much slower. But because you only have one image, it's not that big of a deal. But you do that on video, and that might be 7 more days of having to do this. And so the mistake like that is going to cost you a lot more time, and time equals money. And all of a sudden you tell a producer that, and that's like, no, that's not going to work. We can't do that. So it's very important to know the workflow and what that's going to mean in explaining that to the client, not just what does it look on screen.
And I'll just add that I happen to know in New York City a couple of really top-notch colorists. I mean, the best of the best have a strong stills background, a strong art background. And so it definitely gives you a leg up. You just have to break some of those habits of trying to get everything to the nth degree of perfection. You have to break that habit out and be willing to kind of, I call it working in passes. I think most of us probably, do some version of that approach of finding a base level, getting to the end of the job, and then circling back. And now you understand the scope, you know where the problems are. You can, zoom in on those problems, solve those. Then you start over again. And now you can start refining and really, like as an artist, start applying that artistic eye, watching how it travels around the image as you move from shot to shot within each shot. So you just have to kind of learn not to try to get it right the first time, because you're either going to run out of time or run out of money before you get to the end of the job.
John threw this question in the chat box for you guys, and he said that he is a Mixing Light paid member, and he's been learning coloring for 2 years. What reference monitors do you suggest for color work that are under two grand for Rec 709 and decent HDR? Is that Rec 7? I don't know.
Yeah, Rec 709 is correct.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So he currently has an X-Rite i1 display pro color meter.
Yeah, so he's doing calibration. I'd actually I'm interested, Oliver, when you deal with your students, how do you answer this question?
Well, cost is a big factor. So for most people these days, a decent LG is probably the go-to. And then, work from there. It's an evolving thing, because the truth of the matter is high-end consumer displays are getting better and better. And if HDR is kind of the rub in all of that, pretty much these days, anything that's Rec 709 is probably going to look pretty good if you've got a stable display that can be reasonably well calibrated. But then you got the issue of what are you delivering for? So much of what we deliver for is the web. And when you get down to it, okay, if you're working off of an iMac display, who's to say that's not more accurate for a web deliverable than, a high-end Flanders or something like that. So there is no real simple answer for that, but it really is a matter of budget. And I'd say LG is probably the go-to these days for the most cost-effective. And then I think the Asus Pro something, I forget what
the Pro Art.
Yeah, that seems to be getting a lot of kudos from folks.
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
Really, for HDR, unfortunately, for serious HDR, as you said, or you said decent HDR, you're still looking at your Flanders, ISO, Sony sort of money, which is up there, $30,000, I think, still. You can get like the Asus, the Pro Art, Dell are making one at around the 5,000 sort of mark, which you can, I call it sort of play HDR, but that's where I would probably go, as Oliver said, with one of the LG. We're talking about probably the 55, the domestic type one, but you're going to need to calibrate it. It will not come out of the box. You mentioned you got the calibration. They're great for SDR, not ideal for HDR delivering. But if you want to start experimenting and shooting or playing with HDR, then by all means, that would be a good go-to.
What I would add to this conversation is one of the big things whenever I teach, and this question invariably comes up, and it's come up on Mixing Light many times. You can listen to our podcast for our member podcasts. We've answered various forms of this question many times. The thing that I always start with is understanding what's the point of the reference monitor behind me here on, your left. And the answer is it's to give me an accurate representation of the ones and zeros that are on the hard drive. Those ones and zeros have a very specific meaning. And if you want to get into reference grade HDR grading, you have to spend $25,000 for that monitor to accurately represent those ones and zeros on your hard drive. But you could go for the LG over my other shoulder here, which is like a C7, I think. It's several years old at this point. I can put, a $1,000 box in front of it, calibrate it so it's a perceptual match to the reference display. And I'm getting a large portion in Rec 709, which is just standard high definition television. Then you're going to get, this is good enough to pretty much match the reference monitor. But when you start talking HDR, it's going to start exhibiting behaviors that modify what those ones and zeros are. So the question comes down, are you billing for that HDR reference grade? If you're just looking for something that gets you to start playing with it, experimenting with it, get a feel for it, then yeah, any of these lower cost solutions that you can get your hands on that are well reviewed, I'm down with that. But the moment you start billing as if you're doing an HDR reference grade, then it gets into truth in advertising. And at that point, you really need to start stepping up your game. And that's how I delineate as to what point do you really need to spend that extra money to get into that game.
Yeah, but Pat, that's the same for SDR as well, isn't it, really? I mean, if you are billing for your color correction services and you don't have a color calibrated monitor, then that's the same thing, really, isn't it?
It is. And so, yeah, and the questioner did have like an X-Rite, which is, a little probe that you can put on the display here, and you put up color patches and you can calibrate your monitor. So even in SDR, if you're trying to get the rates that you're finding on the blue collar post collective salary thing, and you're saying, I am going to do this in a reference environment, then the onus is on you that your display is properly calibrated. Just in Rec 709, I think, Warren, you would agree that in Rec 709, that LG will work for you as long as you're calibrated.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Here's one other thought that I encounter, I think, more often than the necessity of am I charging correctly. I encounter issues in the display pipeline or that's happened earlier than post. And for me, the reliance that my monitor is correctly calibrated, human eyes white balance, that's what we do, that I can go to my client and say, this is what the image is. And I cannot tell you how many times in the short career that I've had in a professional colorist, so I know you guys have had this, where the client goes, are you sure? And I go, I guarantee you, this is what your image looks like. And they go, didn't look like that in Avid. And I go, I promise you, this is the way that it looks. And then we all burst laughing because maybe there was a wrong render setting. Maybe the After Effects artist clicked at this. And then we can go back and go, okay, don't panic. Let's go figure this out. And then we can go and figure out whatever the problem was. But for me, I don't have to think going, is it my monitor? Is it my configuration settings? I already know. And the same thing with the calibration. Part of the reason I pay so much for the FSI is I send it back once a year and just have them calibrate it. So it's not that I can't do it myself. It's that I choose not to. And it's just a convenience factor. I can definitely go out and buy an LG and have Dave Abrams, one of our local calibrators here in LA, come and do that. And that's definitely a valid way of doing it. But once you get to a certain way, it's really nice to be able to say, this is out of the box how it should be. And I can count on that.
Yeah.
But, well, the other thing that's always an issue is the client approval and getting the client to review it on something that's trustworthy. And even if you had two people in two different rooms with the identical image, they're going to perceive it differently. So, when you're doing color correction, there's no way to get around having the person in the room with the colorist, at least at the end of the game, when there's a trim pass or something, so that if there's a discrepancy and he says, well, to me it looks like this, and you say, well, okay, it's not what I'm seeing. If you're both looking at the same display, at least there's communication going on that say, okay, well, let's understand what the difference is here. Whereas if it's a remote operation or you're just posting files to Frame or some other review and approval service, sometimes you can be pretty far off because people simply have different displays or they perceive color differently.
I have a business. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, no, I was going to say I have a business question because you all have been doing this for a while. You're pros. And when you freelance, you're taking care of everything. You're doing the job and you're also doing the business side. So what kind of advice or piece of advice do you have for people who are starting out in terms of keeping your business in order, invoicing clients and all of that?
Number one, you have to keep track of your time. Number one, you need to keep track of your time. Number two, there are a lot of great online resources for that. There are a lot of apps that will plug into your browsers or onto your watch. On my watch, I actually have an app that I tap and it starts my billing on that particular job. And I can load it up with a bunch of different jobs. If I'm switching, I stop one job, I start the next job, right? And then at the end of the day, that actually syncs up with online where I can actually generate an invoice, So there are things you can do that will help you track your time, make use of billing software, online software, QuickBooks. I use Xero.com here in the United States. I'm sure in Australia, probably Warren has some other bits of software that he uses. In Europe, there are probably some other software solutions that they use. And so, my job as a solo guy is to make myself seem as large as I can. And one way I do that is when I invoice, they can pay by check, they can pay by credit card, they can do a direct bank transfer. I set those different payment methods up in that software, and that gives them the confidence that I know what I'm doing. Like I can bill, right? So that's one aspect of that.
Well, but also running a business is, you got to know what the tax situation is in the place that you live, both federal, state, city, what sort of permitting. And if that's not where your head's at, then get together either with an accountant or somebody that you hire. Sometimes you can find other freelancers. Obviously, in this business, there are people who do production accounting as a freelance gig. Maybe it makes sense for you to partner up with somebody like that as a client of theirs for them to take care of your books and make sure you're legal in all the areas.
And I think it took me a while to learn that you do not need to be good at business to run your own business. You can absolutely outsource the stuff that you're not necessarily good at. I'm terrible at accounting, and in fact, I hate doing it. It's just not something I'm not naturally good at, and that's perfectly fine. There are people that are never good at accounting. That's something that I outsource. I automate as much of my business as possible, and that's something that I encourage all freelancers to do. I automate my health insurance. I automate my savings. I automate as much as possible so I don't need to deal with it, and then I touch it every couple weeks or months when it's needed.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like my wife.
Some of us have spouses that'll do that. I mean, if you've got a significant other that's good at that type of stuff, that's awesome.
Yeah, because some of that. I was going to ask you guys, it's hard chasing money, isn't it? Because you've got the relationship on a creative basis. You don't really want to be then emailing them going, hey, you really should have paid this. So it's good, like Jason says, to outsource that or have a different email address, accounts at Warren Eagles Color or whatever, so they think it's not coming directly from you. That's quite a good tip as well. And I don't know what payment terms are like in the US, but things are starting to drag a little bit. And, I find the bigger companies are the worst. Like they drag into 60 days easily.
Someone asked me for 90, and I was just like, that's not going to work. What will it take for you to pay right now?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have, it's hard to negotiate this, but a certain amount up front, right? I want a third up front and the balance when I deliver the master. And if I don't get paid, you don't get your master. Now, you can't do that with every client, but a lot of them are very understanding and will agree to that. Obviously, if you're doing a job for a big corporation, you have no options there, right? You either accept their terms or don't do the job.
Well, actually, one of the best pieces of advice I was given, especially with like Fortune 100 companies or Fortune 500 companies, publicly traded companies, is offer an early payment discount of like 1.5%. Because oftentimes many publicly traded companies have it written into their charter that if, and you offer that 1.5 discount if paid within 10 days, and their charters require them to prioritize any invoice that they get a discount on when paying early, and they will pay that early, right? So a lot of these big companies, by taking a little bit off the top, putting a time frame on it, pay in 10 days, take 1.5% off, and you're going to get paid in 10 days. I do that. I do that with several of my big clients. That works great. I will say, if you are uncomfortable having this discussion, you either have to force yourself to have this discussion or work for a company who does it on your behalf, because you will end up going broke if you're not comfortable at the beginning of the job talking about terms of payment and that type of thing. I have Mixing Light. You do a search on our website for net 30, and I have this is free. It's in front of the paywall. I have a really strong argument there about not accepting net 30. That net 30 is what the big boys do when they deal with each other. When they deal with you, they use that to manage their cash flow, not yours, right? So you become their cash flow management strategy. And I've seen this ridiculous abuse of that net 30 that turns into net 60, into net 90. And the next thing you know, you're in small claims court. Yeah, we've all been through it. And so my big thing is, if you can, get 50% up front and 50% on delivery, or some sort of milestone. If I work on a series where I'm getting 10 or 12 episodes, I'll say, all right, 10% to lock this job in and lock in the quote. You have to pay me 10% up front. Then you're going to pay me, 20% when we're 20% of the way through, and then another 20% after another 20%. And you do the milestone payment thing. And again, but this is all negotiation. What I tend to do is, in my initial quote, I'll put in my preferred payment method, which is usually 50-50. And then when I send the quote, I follow with an email and say, hey, look at the payment terms. I call it out. I say, it's in the fine print. Read the payment terms. Let me know if we have a problem. And then we can have the discussion.
That's great advice. That's awesome. I can't believe how fast this hour went. We have time for one more question. I feel like we could go like another hour. This is awesome. But it is from Vera Diana again. I hope I said it right. She said, what's the best way to keep learning coloring and video editing even after university? Like, are there courses online, or where can people go?
Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a bit of a dream team here. Oliver has a website that he's constantly writing about new plugins, new tools, new workflows. I have a free color correction newsletter, taoofcolor.com. And so I link out to tutorials. I scour the internet every week, and basically 42 Sundays a year, I'm sending out a newsletter that links to all of these details, interviews with colorists, gear that might be interested to the color correction community. Warren, I guess I'll let you pitch your stuff, but mixinglight.com is an online website. It's a membership-based website where we have multiple colorists. Jason is a contributor to the website. And we're constantly sharing what we learn on the job as a way of mentoring, right? I mean, again, our job on Mixing Light is to shrink your learning curve and allow you to not make the same mistakes we make. And that's a big part of that. So mixinglight.com, taocolor.com are the things that kind of encircle me.
Sure. And I actually am going to go down the line again and have everyone just kind of pitch yourselves. If you have a website or courses to take, this is where you can tell us all about it. And you can also drop any information, links to your websites, Instagram, into the chat box as well for people to grab there. So Warren, I'm going to start with you again because you're first on my screen. So just where people can find you.
You can find me, Warren Eagles, on Instagram and Twitter. And I put the iColorist is my training company. We traditionally run classroom training where you get people in a room, which is the best way to learn anything. Obviously, current climate's a bit tricky. So we're doing some things on Zoom. But in answer to that question, really, I'd set yourself a few hours every week just for learning and researching and learning new stuff. And I still do that now. If I'm not busy and I've got a day, a structure in my day, I'm going to look into a few new cameras and see what's new. Or I'm going to do a bit of practicing on HDR, or I'm going to learn a new tool. And just set that into your structure for your week, I think is a good way to do that, because we never stop learning. Every day, every week, we'll get something new, which is fun.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. Jason, you're next.
So first off, I want to mention that I'm actually a student of Warren and Patrick's, and I highly recommend both their courses on, I actually learned on Tao of Color. That course is not available anymore, but I highly, highly recommend you check out Mixing Light if you're looking for continued color education. And Warren has a huge amount of courses. I've lost track of how many you have at this point, but I literally have gone through all of them. And I just recommend that everybody, if you're looking or you're interested in learning more about color, to just keep practicing, as Warren mentioned. If you're interested, you see a look that you like in a movie or a TV show, go online, download a still of it, bring it into Resolve, look at it on the scopes. I run a website called pixeltoolspost.com where we post basically tools for DaVinci Resolve that make it a little bit easier and hopefully faster for you to get to the end destination. If you want to follow me on social, you can follow me at jbodacious on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on all that fun stuff. But just keep practicing and watch other people. You'll pick up techniques. And whether you like them or not, it's interesting for you to learn from other people. I still watch tutorials every single week from new people, whether it's Warren or Patrick or even people that I've never heard of before, because I learn interesting techniques.
Awesome. Patrick, your turn.
Yes, I just typed in the link to my free newsletter because I link out everyone on this call. I've linked out to them. And so that might be one place where you can just kind of sign up and then every week it flows into you, although I'm in kind of summer mode right now. So about every other week, every third week. I will say that because I've already pitched my wares, I want to recommend both what Jason and Warren said, which is, have some footage on your laptop when you're, if you're sitting in front of the TV and you generally have your laptop around, whatever software it is you're using, Premiere, Final Cut, Avid, Resolve, whatever it is, have some footage loaded up that you maybe downloaded from Red and from Blackmagic's website. They have camera original footage from their cameras and Canon, right? And have a timeline on there. And if you see a commercial you like, mimic it, right? Mimicking is how all artists start their career. You take a look at someone who's doing great work. And if you're watching, a national television show and there's a national spot, a commercial that's on there, then mimic that look if you like that look. See if you can come up with it and recreate it. So that's a great way of just, in your downtime, kind of skilling up and experimenting and stretching your muscles in ways that you haven't been asked to do so.
That's awesome. And that's a great exercise for people to do, for sure. Oliver.
Okay, well, you can reach me at oliverpeters.com, and I also have a blog that is digitalfilms.wordpress.com, and that's kind of product reviews, tips and tricks, things like that. As far as, sort of the question, obviously YouTube is the place where a lot of people go and search stuff. And right now, because Resolve is kind of the hot go-to for everybody, just because it's such an all-in-one application, there are a zillion tutorials on Resolve, some of them official from the Blackmagic folks, particularly audio, like Mary Plummer does like a great in-depth thing on the Fairlight side, but also different colorists posts. You want the orange and teal look, you can probably find 400 videos that show you their take on how to do that. So lots of ways to do it. And pretty much everybody has a smartphone these days with some camera capability. Along the lines of practice, go out and shoot, load the stuff in, play with it, look at it and go, gosh, why does it look so terrible? Go online and research, how can I make this better? What did I do wrong?
I will add to what Oliver said, looking for training resources. Another great one, if you happen to be on Resolve or want to learn Resolve, they have PDF training courses, books that have downloadable practice files. And they're pretty fantastic. I mean, Mary Plummer's book on Fairlight is just absolutely killer. The book on the Fusion page, which is hard to find information even today on YouTube or even on Mixing Light. I mean, we try, but there just aren't a lot of great artists out there who are out there in sharing mode. And that book is pretty fantastic on learning some of those tools, as well as there's a color page book. There's two editing books and just a general book. So those are free. Download them, free assets. Go through them, and then play with those assets in front of the TV when you're done.
Awesome. I can't thank you guys enough for being here today and for just spilling all the info that you have spilled over the past hour. I know this was super informative and helpful to everyone who has been tuning in. Thank you again. And that's it for today, everyone. For everything voiceover, you can go to my website, sarahmarintz.com, and Sarah Marintz on Instagram. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks. You might be looking at Shoots.video and thinking, so how does this all work? Is this about A, setting up the whole crew for me, B, just giving me options and having me handle it, or C, something in between? Well, it's D, all of the above. To put it simply, we're here to help you in any way that we can to get the crew and talent you need for your next production. We believe that every level of video production can benefit from a well-maintained list of qualified crew members for every position. This goes for pre-pro, on-set, and for post. Every project is different, so if you need a producer to help manage the decision-making process, then we can totally do that. If you're already a producer and want to build your own crew from scratch, then go for it. We're here to make your next production a success. And if you are crew or talent looking for producers that want you, then you've come to the right place. Sign up now, and also leave a referral for any solid people that you know that are already on here. Thank you for considering Shoots.video, and happy shooting!